Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I appreciate you guys coming and stopping by. If you're new to the channel, thanks for checking it out. I hope you like what you see and what you hear. I try to do things different on my channel, try to show you these locations where these encounters happen, so I hope you enjoy that. Having said that, today's video is a classic story about Native American trapper Muchalat Harry, as told by Peter Byrne in his book from 1975, The Search for Bigfoot. Now this story is pretty fascinating. I won't give away the whole story, but this Native American had a very thrilling and surprising encounter with a group of Bigfoots. Wait until you guys hear this. But before I tell you the story, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys these locations of where this is happening so you guys can keep track and you guys can know where I'm talking about when I'm telling you guys the story. You guys can follow along by looking at Google Earth images that I'm going to show you. Alright everybody, here's the Nuka River where Muchalat Harry took off from and where he eventually came back to. And I've measured all of this, and it's 45 miles from, there was a settlement right over here in this area, and if he paddles his canoe down through this strait here and comes around through here, through this little opening, and it comes down through here, and then around this way to the mouth of the Canooma River right there. That's 45 miles. So that's from Nuka to the mouth of the Canooma right here is approximately 45 miles. I did the measurement and I'll show you that with the measurement on the map also. So imagine that. He paddled that whole way on the way back. And I'm not going to ruin the story for you by giving you too much information, but I just wanted you guys to be aware of how far he went. And if you follow the Canooma River up 12 miles, it wraps around this way. I've already researched this and found the watershed. It comes all the way up through here, through this canyon, and 12 miles ends up right about in here, right in this area right here. This is about 12 miles from the mouth of the Canooma. And you guys can see it's a really wild place, high mountains all around it, and this is the best spot that I could find 12 miles from the mouth of the Canooma River. Now you guys can see all these streams and stuff coming in, so that would be a great place for him to set his traps, beaver traps and all that other stuff. But this is basically 12 miles from the mouth of the Canooma River, and I just wanted to show you guys this location so you guys can pay attention to the location as I'm reading the story. I'll go ahead and show you, throughout this story, this location on the map. And right here, he says he was taken to a rock ledge, and there's a couple places that I found that looks like it could be the rock ledge he's talking about. I don't know, maybe right there. I don't really think that that's it though. But what about maybe over here somewhere? He said in the story he was taken like a mile or two from his camp, and if his camp is right here in the middle of this opening where all these streams are coming in, there's a few places that's a mile or two from his camp that could be the rock ledge. And in the story he says he was carried uphill. So there's a couple places, but it's hard to find the exact place where they might have taken him. There's one other place over here that I wanted to show you guys really quick. This kind of flat spot right there. You see that flat spot in here? Like maybe they could have took him up on that rock ledge right there. It's not really a ledge, but maybe that's what he was talking about. I'm not too sure. Alright, now that I showed you guys the locations of these occurrences, let me go ahead and get into this story. So Peter Byrne writes that late in 1972, I had an occasion to visit Vancouver Island. I was on a routine investigating trip, and when I found myself at Nanaimo, not too far by road from the west coast and the scene of Muchalat Harry's adventures, I drove there. I stopped in Gold River and obtained from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police some maps and instructions on how to get to the Canooma River area. Nowadays, there is a logging road that runs all the way down to the mouth of the river, and one Sunday morning, with the logging trucks out of the way, I drove there and made camp on the Kenuma. I spent several days there, walking the riverbed and exploring. I tried to make a rough determination of where Muchalat Harry might have had his lean-to, and I found a place that offered a good campsite, 12 miles from the mouth of the river on the edge of a series of high bluffs. The salmon were running in the Kenuma while I was there, and all night long I could hear them splashing up the shallow waters of the river. In the morning, Black Bear worked the river, getting the salmon that had come ashore in the night or had been tangled in the limbs of fallen trees that lay in the river. I counted 6 bears in several days. The country was generally wild and deserted, and the actual mouth of the Kenuma, where it flowed into the salt waters of the inlet, was one of the most beautiful places I have ever seen. Some of the forest close to the river had been logged off, but the logging work had moved on west, and while I was there, it was quiet. The days began with morning mist on the river, and then warmed to the clear crispness of perfect autumn weather. Evenings were cool and damp, and nights bright with starlight that provided almost enough light to read. I found no sign of Bigfoot on the Kenuma, nor any sign of Muchalat Harry's trap line or lean-to. I hardly expected to find anything of the latter after 40-odd years. But even though Muchalat Harry was long gone, the river and the forest remained unchanged. The splashing salmon, the cold clear water of the Kenuma, the moss-covered banks, the shallow pools in the forest that the Kenuma drained that were the breeding places of the salmon, the river birds, the plodding bears, the deep, silent waters of the inlet, all were as they must have been 40 years ago, when Muchalat Harry cased his canoe and made his camp there. Now, on to Muchalat Harry's story. According to the Indians, there was once a large number of Bigfoot living on Vancouver Island, a large island 12,408 square miles in area, off the west coast of British Columbia. The Indians knew about them, feared them, and respected them, but granted that they were harmless. One of the Indians of the Nuka tribe, who lived at Nuka in 1928, claims to have been carried off by them and held captive for some time. The story, told to me by Father Anthony Tehar of Mount Angel Abbey in Oregon, is a curious one. Father Anthony, a much-loved missionary priest who traveled the west coast of Vancouver Island for many years, was living at Nuka at the time of the story, and he knew Muchalat Harry very well. Muchalat Harry was a trapper and something of a rarity among his fellow tribesmen. He was, according to Father Anthony, a tough, fearless man of excellent physique. In the course of his trapping, he was wont to spend long weeks in the forest alone, something that the average Indian did not do in those days. The Indians of the coast were apparently a rather timid people, and they seemed to regard the deep forest as the home and territory of the Bigfoot. When they went into the deep island forest for any reason, they never went alone. Muchalat Harry was different from the other Indians. He went in the forest alone and feared nothing. Late one autumn, Muchalat Harry set off for the woods with his traps and camping gear. His plan was to set out a trap line and stay in the woods for several months. He headed for his favorite hunting area, the Kenuma River, at the head of the Tunapa Inlet. From Nuka, he paddled his own canoe to the mouth of the Kenuma. There he cased the canoe and headed upstream on foot. Approximately 12 miles upstream, he made his base camp, and after building himself a lean-to, started to put out his trap line. One night, while wrapped in his blankets and clad only in his underwear, he was suddenly picked up by a huge male Bigfoot and carried off into the hills. He was not carried very far, probably a distance of about 2 or 3 miles at the most. When daylight came, he was able to see that he was in a sort of camp under a high rock shelf and surrounded by some 20 Bigfoot. They were of all sexes and sizes. For some time, they stood around him and stared at him, the males to the front of the curious group, females behind them, and the young ones to the rear. Muchalat Harry was frightened at first, and his fear grew into terror when he noticed, he said, the large number of bones laying around the campsite. When he saw these, he was convinced that the Bigfoot were going to eat him. The Bigfoot did not harm him in any way, though. Occasionally, one came forward and touched him, as if feeling him, and when they discovered that his quote-unquote skin was loose, it was in fact his woolen underwear, several came forward and pulled at it gently. While they looked at him and examined him, Muchalat Harry sat with his back to the rock wall and did not move. He was cold and hungry, but his thoughts were only on escape. Sometime in the late afternoon, curiosity on the part of the Bigfoot seemed to slacken, and with most of the Bigfoot out of camp, probably food gathering, he thought, there came the opportunity that he needed. He leapt to his feet and ran for his life, never looking back. He ran downhill towards where he guessed the river to be, and sure enough, he soon came to his campsite. In what must have been blind panic, he bypassed his camp and ran for 12 miles to where his canoe was cached at the mouth of the Conuma. Father Anthony describes the story of Muchalat Harry's arrival at Nuka as follows. It was probably 3 a.m. He and his brother Benedictines were asleep, and the village was quiet. Suddenly there was a series of wild cries from the waters of the inlet. Lights were lit, and he and others hurried down to the water's edge. There, near frozen and exhausted in his canoe, lay Muchalat Harry. He was barefoot and clad only in his wet and torn underwear. He had paddled his canoe through the wintry night 45 miles from the mouth of the Conuma River. Father Anthony and his companions carried the almost lifeless form up from the water's edge. It took 3 weeks to nurse Muchalat Harry back to sanity and good health. Father Anthony, who took him into his own care, did the nursing, and he told me that during the course of these 3 weeks, Muchalat Harry's hair turned to pure white. The story of the kidnapping came out slowly. At first, Muchalat Harry would talk to no one. Then he told Father Anthony what had happened, and later others. When he was fully recovered to health, he was asked when he was planning on to go back to collect his belongings, the camp equipment, his pots and pans, his trap line, and above all, his rifle, at the lean-to on the Conuma. In 1928, a trap line and all of its pieces must have been worth a great deal to an island Indian. A rifle alone would be regarded as a highly prized possession. But Muchalat Harry never went back to the Conuma. Not only did he never return there, according to Father Anthony, he never left the settlement at Nuka, never went into the woods again for the rest of his life. He preferred to lose all of his valuables and probably hard-won possessions rather than risk another encounter with the Bigfoot. Alright, there you guys have it. Another classic Sasquatch Bigfoot story. Another one where these creatures are so curious they pick up and take away people and bring them back to wherever they are staying to check them out. Why do you guys think that they do that? Do you think they're just curious? Do you think that they have ominous intentions, like they were going to eat him? What do you think was going to happen with this Native American? It's a good thing he didn't have to stay there to find out, right? At least he got to escape. And this isn't the only encounter I've found where they literally pick these people up and take them away in the middle of the night. Imagine that. Imagine being camped out in the middle of some dark woods, and all of a sudden some huge creature picks you up and takes you away. You know you can't fight back. You know you can't do anything. Especially back then, he probably didn't have his rifle handy. caught him by surprise, and he was just in his underwear, according to the story. That has to be one of the most frightening things a person could ever happen to them, especially a grown man. Well, anybody, but I mean, even a grown man that they said he was a marvelous physical specimen, you know, at the prime of his life, basically. And this whole encounter changed him, where his hair turned pure white after a few weeks. And they said he never left the Nuka settlement ever again. Imagine that. A Native American trapper who spent most of his life out in the woods alone, not afraid of anything, after this incident occurred, never left the settlement and never went back into the woods again the rest of his life. Whatever happened to him must have been really, really traumatic for him to change his whole life like that. He must have been going through a lot of stress over this situation, which, you know, who could blame him? I would probably be freaking out also if that happened to me. What about you guys? I mean, leave me some comments. Let me know what you guys think about this story. This one is kind of like really fascinating, kind of crazy if you ask me. I don't understand like what would happen to me, like what I would do, how I would react. I mean, oh, good Lord, I don't even want to think about that. I guess that's where we will leave this one. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. I'd appreciate that very much. And remember, I have brand new merchandise if anybody's interested. Check it out. It's in the link down below. I have more designs coming up, so people are asking me to have some Bigfoot put in the design, and you ask and you shall receive. That is coming very soon. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure once again hit that like button and share it for me. Leave me some comments, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. Until next time, remember guys, where there is a WILLSTAR, there is definitely a way. And we will talk to you guys later. Take care.